Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update for the 19th of March 2023. Let's get straight to our normal starting place, which is the Russian losses as announced by the Ukrainians officially for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, propaganda, inaccurate. I find these indicatively useful and somewhat accurate, actually, and I try and provide you with some sort of meat on a bone that provides a little bit of evidence for the accuracy of these claims. 710 liquidated personnel yesterday. That's a fairly high number. It's Sunday today. You wonder whether, on Sunday and Monday, the figures drop. They sometimes do, and it does appear that the weekend has a little bit to do with it. But then, having said that, you look at the tanks and armored personnel vehicles, the APCs that were lost yesterday. Goodness. So there's no drop there. There's a massive uptick. 21 tanks, 23 APCs. That is really devastating for the Russians. And in fact, I don't know. It could well be that tanks might include the 10 tanks that were taken out in one night by the White Wolves, a group that are doing these nighttime drone attacks with IEDs on tanks. They claim they took out. Well, they showed evidence for taking out 10 in one night. APCs as well. We've seen so much footage over the last few days of pieces of equipment being taken out, particularly with IEDs, but also precision artillery fire. So there's a lot of footage kicking around right now, but that is a really bad set of stats for the Russians. 8 artillery systems, and that's a constant figure as well, really consistent figure, sorry. 8, it might not sound huge, but when you're having that many every day artillery systems getting taken out, they are starting to lose, I think, capability to do large scale artillery strikes. Well, this must take its toll. 1 MLRS, 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems. It is although it looks like a low number, these are often but not always high value systems. I'm going to show you some in a minute, and that I think is important because with the coming offensive, the Ukrainians will want at least some localized superiority, or at least they don't want these anti-aircraft warfare systems in place. So I wonder whether there'll be a concerted effort in areas that they are planning on doing their counteroffensive, whether there's a concerted effort to take out anti-aircraft warfare systems. 4 vehicles and fuel tanks, 3 pieces of special equipment. Don't know what they are, but it could well be that is radar systems or electronic warfare systems or other such pieces of important equipment. But nonetheless, that's a really bad day for mechanized equipment for the Russians. I know I often use the word unsustainable. That's got to be unsustainable. They can't make those. They can't replace those on a daily basis. If they're losing that many in a day, okay, that's not happening every day, but you're averaging out last few weeks at quite some number. It's just they can't replace that. And then when you look at the figures here, this is a group who have made an appeal that, and these are from, I think, the St. Petersburg region, arriving in under the jurisdiction of the DPR, which is Donetsk People's Republic. They say they've taken severe losses. They haven't had artillery support, and they've lost up to 70% of their personnel. Losses in the unit were up to 70%. Despite this, and despite loss of field command and a lack of heavy equipment, they're planning to send the remnants of our unit into slaughter against equipped enemy positions, artillery and tanks with assault rifles, all the while using those who are unable to complete objectives due to health status. So this is a group of Russian soldiers who are complaining about a really terrible situation, and they're saying they've lost 70% of their unit. When you start adding these pieces of jigsaw up, these numbers start looking realistic. Okay, what else has happened? Russians lost this, according to Serhiy Cherevati, who's in charge of the Eastern Group of Armed Forces, so Donetsk area. Russians lost 392 soldiers killed and wounded in the battles in Bakhmut during the day. I mean, that's phenomenal. The question is how many of the Ukrainians lost. Bakhmut is a meat grinder for both sides, but the understanding is that it's worse for the Russians. That's why the Ukrainians are remaining there. BBC went onto the front line and part of this interview, Frontline in Bakhmut, very interesting interview. As a company, we kill up to 50 enemies a day, one of them said.
We were in combat every 2 hours. As far as I understand, they were Wagner. We were fighting them. And without overestimating our achievements, I would say a single company was killing 50 of their men a day. We checked the figures. They are awful numbers.
Again, going back, so Cherevati says 392 in Bakhmut in one day, killed and injured. These guys are saying our unit took out 50 soldiers in one day, and you start thinking, oh goodness, yeah, these are fairly realistic. Okay, so then on to so as claimed, the destruction of Russian air defense system OSA. So this is going back to the air defense losses. Some detonation on the ground is visible as a result, but good luck finding out what it is. It's not the greatest video quality here, but that is apparently, and it cooks off pretty majorly, an OSA air defense system. So that you then look back at the figures and think, okay, well, yeah, that's one of the air defense systems taken out. Here we have 2 Russian Tor M2 air defense systems hit by Ukrainian Ram 2 kamikaze UAVs. Some people have said this is the first video evidence. Lovely. Some say this is the first video evidence of these being used. It's not actually. There's some video evidence of these Ram 2 kamikaze UAVs being used last year, but it is certainly rare footage, and 2 Tor systems being taken out is a loss for the Russians. Again, air defense, and actually there's your 3. If they are the 3 that were lost yesterday, there's your 3 evidence. Okay, it's reported that Ukrainian artillery destroyed a Russian military base near Hladivka, on the left bank of the Kherson region. Also in Olekshi, explosions are heard right now, so they are hitting around Kherson. And here we've got temporarily occupied Kakhovka region. Again in Kherson, there was an arrival at a Russian base there, and also in that area, rumors began to appear that Sergei Moskalenko was killed by an IED planted under a car in Novokakhovka. He is or was a Russian-appointed head of pre-trial detention center, where one of the largest torture centers in the occupied territories is located. So there will be a lot of anger against him, people like him who are organizing these torture centers. But point of saying all that is, it appears at quite a few places around. So Olekshi, you've got Kherson there, Olekshi, you've got Novokakhovka, Kakhovka. Quite a lot of places along the river have been hit yesterday. One of the largest, so now going on to Russia on fire, one of the largest Russian chemical plants is on fire near Moscow. 1 person was injured. These are happening so frequently now. There seems to be a real sort of uptick in the figures concerning fires in Russia. I keep saying this, but I'd love to see the stats. Okay, in the direction of Horlivka, Konstantinivka was hit by 3 artillery shells and 5 volleys from Hurricanes with cluster munitions. So these are multiple launch rocket systems. These are ones I've talked about previously. Don't hear much about these, but they supposedly have longer range. So longer range than the HIMARS. Hitting Konstantinivka is not a longer range though. So 1 person died, 5 were wounded, 20 private houses, a high-rise building, a school and a shop were damaged. And here, operational situation in the region this morning, the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration said that the Russians attacked Kramatorsk with MLRS and cluster munitions. 2 people were killed and 10 were wounded. 76 private houses were hit, and there's the kind of evidence of that. Those are places behind Bakhmut, so places like Konstantinivka, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk. They are starting to get hit more frequently. I say that they have been hit fairly consistently, even before the fighting was on the Bakhmut doorstep. They are within range, and they are certainly operational targets for the Russians. So anyway, that's a kind of hits and losses roundup. There's lots more to be said, and I have just picked a few representative things. There's so much footage coming out at the moment. Anyway, let's go on to odds and sods before we go into military aid. So some odds and sods. This is great. It's just as top trolling. I just have to share this. This is a US embassy in Kyiv yesterday saying, as we celebrate Global Recycling Day, and I'm a big environmentalist, and this is partly why the war hurts for me, a lot. It's the human cost is obviously terrible, but the environmental cost is awful. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we can do to reduce waste, reuse items, and restore the health of our planet. And it has the old tractor brigade recycling a tank, pulling it along with sunflowers around. That's just a lovely bit of trolling there. Well done, the US Embassy in Kyiv. Russians, of course, they've come to denazify Ukraine, especially with their own sort of Nazis, with their Nazi tattoos. Probably a Wagner ex-convict, not necessarily, but there you go. Who are the Nazis here? Not too sure. British MOD, so this is the UK Defence Intelligence, has tacitly accepted it. That Russia says it's tacitly accepted it won't capture Zaporizhia. So that being the oblast of Zaporizhia. So let's go to look at the map just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. So the Zaporizhia Oblast, I don't know if you can see the purple lines to indicate Zaporizhia, comes up here and down there. And so Melitopol, Berdyansk are in Zaporizhia Oblast, and so is Zaporizhia City, and Zaporizhia City is by far the largest, and it's the capital of Zaporizhia Oblast. So you would expect that to be, going forward, the intention for the Russians to take that city so that it's a capital of the oblast that they have already declared is part of Russian territory. On March 23rd, 2023, authorities in the Russian-controlled part of Zaporizhia Oblast published a decree that declared occupied Melitopol as the oblast capital. The Russian-installed head of the oblast said that this was a temporary measure until the city of Zaporizhia was controlled by Russia. Zaporizhia was one of the 4 oblasts President Putin claimed to have annexed as part of the Russian Federation. Russia's never occupied Zaporizhia city, a major industrial center of 700,000 people, which is approximately 35 kilometers from the current front line. The quiet declaration of an alternative capital is likely tacit acknowledgement within the Russian system that its forces are highly unlikely to seize previously planned major objectives in the near future. And that's the UK intelligence update. Now, yesterday or last night even, Putin was in Mariupol, and here he is speaking to some locals, a huge throng of locals, about 5 of them in total, six locals there, maybe 7. There's a guy just standing behind here, and you wonder, are these guys paid actors? Are they really coming out to his side-eye look there to welcome Putin? This guy has I don't know if you can see that behind my head, or I'll show you in a second. The guy to the right has earphones, so he's definitely not just someone that's just come out to welcome Putin. He might be in this huge crowd of people, but he appears to be very much part of the security personnel. I've been thinking recently that his hair is thinning at the back. I don't know whether he's getting some kind of treatment. There's theories about cancer. There's theories about he was limping quite a lot yesterday. I showed you that in a video. I think he has serious health problems. And there's been lots of talk about these health problems. In fact, I'm going to revisit this in the geopolitics section. Just to this is actually in the wrong place, but not only are there health problems, there are people planted in here, and it's happening at night, and he's obviously very paranoid that if it's in the daytime he could get hit, so on and so forth. Anyway, I've talked a lot about how there are these accumulations of Ukrainian equipment. I don't know whether this is clean Germany, Poland, or some during some training exercise. If you just have a load of equipment here, this looks like it's all painted in the European style. So I'm not 100% sure this is sort of popped up. There's just a vast. This is certainly something's happening now. Because there's too much equipment and too many troops here for this to be, I think, any other training than Ukraine. I would have thought. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes people claim this is all Ukraine doing X, Y, and Z, and now because it's months ago, whatever. So this has popped up. And it's interesting footage because there's a variety of equipment being used here. You've got combined arms taking place. You've got all sorts of stuff going on, and it's again this idea that there is this accumulation of equipment for the Ukrainians, and it's the same happening for the Russians. I've said this over the last few days. You see lots of footage of this and evidence of this happening for the Ukrainians. But where is the evidence that the Russians have got the same kind of capability or capacity, just the amount of troops and equipment? Well, actually, yesterday some footage has come out. Russia moves more and more heavy equipment through Mariupol to the Zaporizhia front, scared for an upcoming offensive. So this isn't necessarily offensive capability for the Russians, but defensive. Locals report that columns with equipment have been seen driving on and off towards Volnovakha, which is just south east of Vuhledar and Melitopol in the last 3 or 4 days. So there is some equipment hanging around for the Russians, but the argument might be that it's going to be used defensively rather than offensively. The whole Russian offense seems to have been something of a damp squib. In Mariupol and other temporarily occupied territories, there is a severe shortage of skills, especially medics. Even with fewer hospitals, Russia is now trying to tempt, bribe, or force 125 doctors and 125 more nurses to head to Ukraine. So they are trying to get these professionals out of Russia and into Ukraine or into the occupied territories because there's a massive lack. I wonder about this kind of whole idea of liberation. You look at Mariupol, and you think they've destroyed it, flattened it. How much money, just more than anything, how much money is it going to cost the Russians once they've liberated all these areas to actually get them to actually functioning places where people would want to live? This isn't liberation, it's destruction. It's absolutely terrible. And then you look at Bakhmut. They are destroying Bakhmut. What are they going to do afterwards? They're going to have to fully rebuild it. Who's going to pay for that? Russia's going to have to pay for that. They are it's just the whole thing doesn't make any sense. They're shooting themselves in the foot, politically, financially, economically, uh, in hearts and minds. Just the whole thing is insane. But it's a sunk cost fallacy. Oh, we're in this now, in for a penny, in for a pound. You know, can't pull out now. It show that we've lost. So you end up just losing even more. Going on to military aid, Poland and Slovakia will jointly transfer 33 MiG-29 fighters. I talked about this, but the more kind of concrete details are coming out. 13 from Slovakia, 20 from Poland. That's at the moment. I don't know whether the others will be in an unsuitable state and therefore might be used as kind of spares and whatnot. These are older planes, arguably coming out to being obsolete. So how they'll be used will be interesting. I don't know whether they'll be kitted out with NATO capabilities or whether they'll just be used for flying around much further back defensively against like drones and missiles. And some of those planes that were being used for that will then be pushed up to the front to be used for offensive things. I don't know. I'm no expert, obviously. Canadian Ministry of Defence has announced today that they are transferring a number of Panzer 3A1 armoured recovery vehicles to Ukraine. I've done a whole thing on Combined Arms Initiative, and you can't do a big counteroffensive without a big bunch of these things. You need these. And in fact, Trentselenko says in answer to the 240 Volvo tactical trucks that are being given to the Ukrainian army by the Belgians, and I reported on that. He said in the US Army Armored Brigade Combat Team, ABCT, so for an offensive, there are 208 of these sorts of vehicles to support 87 tanks, 138 Bradleys, 18 self-propelled howitzers. So this kind of so we've got all of these like tanks, Bradleys, and Strikers, and all these other bits and pieces from various countries and self-propelled howitzers. Yeah, we've got all them. So Ukraine have all them. How many of these do they have? Because they need, as you can see here, almost 3 times as many of these tactical vehicles as they have tanks. If this is the numbers to go by, so it's super important that these vehicles, like the Panzer 3A1, there seen by the Canadians being. The Canadians are given to the Ukrainians, and the Volvo trucks, you need these support vehicles in place, and a lot of them, more than you might otherwise think. Now, the US will provide a new military aid package. I'm absolutely fascinated to see what this is going to be in the coming days. It will be vital to Ukraine's success in the coming weeks and months. US National Security Council Coordinator John Kirby said, I wonder whether you will see a slightly different type of equipment in this package as an answer perhaps to the drone. I mean, we might start seeing people throw caution to the wind now and just say, we've got to give Ukraine everything. Okay, geopolitics. This is possibly the biggest piece of news of the day. And I think this has been underplayed. I'm not seeing enough of this talk in mainstream media. Might come out, I don't know. Right. Russia seems to suddenly be saying, okay, we're ready for negotiations, which itself is massively reflective of where they think they are. And it's just so important. So, quote, Russia is ready for the proposals of Western countries and Ukraine regarding the diplomatic settlement of the conflict. But it is possible to achieve a resolution of the conflict only by removing all sanctions and lawsuits in international bodies against Russia, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokeswoman Zakharova said. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So, and this is totally understandable for Russia. It's like, okay, well, is now's the time for negotiations. We want you to remove sanctions, of course, because they don't want to be economically screwed. And we want you to remove the ICC. So again, this is possibly they're possibly rattled by the ICC arrest warrant. So if we're going to do negotiations, we don't want Putin to be a war criminal, and we don't want economic sanctions, and then we'll come to the table. That is such a massive move. This is huge, right? I expect this to be majorly reported on today. I haven't seen the mainstream media today. It may be in there. That needs to be like front and center of the newspapers, because this is the first admission, in my opinion, that Russia know that they're onto a loser here. If they're willing to come to the table, it means that they can't win on the battlefield. That's why Ukraine have not come to the table, because they've got their tails up and they know that they can win this thing militarily. So they're like, we're not going to compromise with Putin. So if Russia are willing to do a deal, then that's a really important reflection of where they think they are. Okay, the US has started sending men fleeing Putin's draft back to Russia, The Guardian writes. This is an interesting article, worth reading. It's a little bit nuanced. It's not like... the long and short of it is that some of these people that have come over the border into the US, Russians who have escaped the draft and are kind of claiming asylum, if they haven't gone through the proper processes and done... So you have a certain amount of time to appeal for a certain way of seeking asylum in this context. Again, read the article. Then some of these people are being sent back, which is an interesting... There's a moral discussion to be had there. Like, should we accept Russians running away from draft? Like, or are they definitely anti-war? Are they only trying to save their own skin type thing? But then, is that not what asylum is? So, lots of interesting discussion about that to be had. But anyway, go and check that out. And again, this is fascinating. Like, a growing isolationism of Russia. They're starting to burn bridges. Noel Report says, I hope Erdogan sees this. Russian propagandists openly discuss the need to annex Istanbul. It's like, what are you doing? They are burning their bridges here, or as they call it, Constantinople, because it is primary Russian land. I wonder how Erdogan responds to these fairy tales. Now, okay, this might be just one wingnut on Russian TV, but that's it's not a good move to start voicing these opinions. Turkey are sitting on a fence here. You start pissing off Turkey, like, you are going to have fewer and fewer friends. Like, the routes through Turkey, the ways that Russia are being able to get some of their, dual purpose imports that they can then, use the microchips to build X, Y, and Z. Well, more isolationist movements. Russia has says goodbye to Europe, and in Moscow, all the flags of European countries were removed at the Europe Square. This is just... we are seeing Russia shrink and shrink, and in terms of geopolitical interaction, influence, just it's a real isolationist posturing we're seeing more and more of. Now, going back to our good friend Putin here, and by good friend I mean sworn enemy. The scene happened allegedly last night in Mariupol, and it's obvious that these people are actors. Look at the faces, especially that woman who's as apathetic as stone. And then this guy at the back, that's what I was talking about, has an earpiece in, so he's obviously just one of security. So you've got about 5 people there. In the middle of in the night, Putin is paranoid. Then he wanders around, and there's video footage of him coming in here, sitting on this seat with just him and one other guy, and that's it. Just very few people around, very paranoid. Not like Zelensky. Zelensky's been out. So when Kherson was recaptured by the Ukrainians, he was there amongst it, in amongst throngs of people, shouting with flags. It's the little things. Compare that to this. That tells you. That should tell you all you need to know. Is Putin really super popular? You got a bunch of old men and one woman, like literally a handful of people quietly talking to Putin, rather than Zelensky in throngs of crowds with people with flags, super actually genuinely happy, genuine happiness. Uh, just a huge difference. Just a massive, massive difference. And then he went to Rostov on Don after that, just over the border into Russia. So lots of people have been talking about this as well. Back to Putin in the occupied territories. Many, especially in Ukraine, are convinced that the wanted suspected war criminal has many body doubles. So they were saying that this is actually a twin, and he doesn't quite look the same. Sometimes I actually think, oh, he looks a bit different there. But then I think, well, he's also on a whole bunch of steroids, and it feeds into this kind of health thing. And his face can either be bloated or not, and it depends how much of the dosage of steroids he's had, etc., etc. But just to let you know that there are these rumors going around that quite often, and this is not unusual. Like lots of people do have this. Were there talks about Melania Trump having a body double that was used quite often? But anyway, it's not unusual for people in important positions to have body doubles for safety reasons and for being able to get to lots of places in a short amount of time, especially when you just need to be seen rather than actually speaking and doing stuff. So it could be that there was body double. There's another one I haven't got here. I did want to share with you, which was him driving around in Melitopol. And I think, here it is. No, this is it actually. So second part to that earlier one. What I find interesting is how the Kremlin tried to make out Putin had driven to Crimea. And again today, they're at pains to show footage of him driving around Mariupol. I believe this shows there's serious concern in Moscow about his health. So he must prove that he's fit. He's just doing things that normal people do rather than sort of limping around and looking a bit full of steroids. But anyway, there you go. That's today's news. Hopefully that was interesting. It's Sunday, and I might struggle to get my videos out per normal, but please check out the channel. They will be out maybe at some point, or maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, please like and subscribe. All the ways you can support the channel are in the description below. Really appreciate all your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you later.